was the summer of 2014, and for my son's bar mitzvah present, just like many Jewish parents, we wanted him to bond with the Holy Land. Oh, it worked perhaps too well. My husband had stayed back at the hotel, and our friends, my son and I, had just stopped in a pharmacy.
Run to the bomb shelter, sweetie. Please hurry. I didn't hear the sirens at first, but the Israelis did. They're used to hearing these things. We ran to the back of the storeroom. It was a 12-foot by 24-foot windowless bomb shelter. My heart's pounding. Boom! Boom! I hear it and feel the percussion of the exploding bombs. I'm trying not to get sick. I look at my 13-year-old son and I think I'll never forgive myself if something happens to him.
That's an excerpt from a speech I gave to the Orange County Jewish Bar Association. It was the first, but not the last time we had to run to a bomb shelter. Our adventure and my transformation is also the subject of my book, Blasted from Complacency, A Journey from Terror to Transformation in Israel. There is no chapter in a parenting book on what to do when a war starts and you're on a family vacation. Think touring extraordinary and sacred sites mixed with cowering in bomb shelters. I'm still trying to get over the Jewish guilt of taking my son to war for his bar mitzvah present. The impact of being human targets helped me understand the plight of Israelis living like this, and it also made me want to work on peace. How Israel is often described on the news is not what I'd seen with my own eyes. And I felt Palestinian parents also preferred their children playing safely in their backyards. The missiles exploded just near enough to blow apart my world as I knew it, forever changing me. And you'd never recognize my life today with what it was like then. I believe I found my life's purpose. Hello, and welcome everyone to Peace with Penny. One thing I've learned, Israelis and Palestinians truly live and know their history. Thankfully, when we've been involved in the U.S. in wars like Vietnam, they were far away from our reality. We might have known people who were involved through the military, but it wasn't happening right here. Israelis and Palestinians live their history on a daily basis. It's intense and raw. When I speak with them, I've seen it's in their kishkas, their insides, and it's been experienced and felt deeply. It's not just words in a history book. Please remember, if you missed any of the episodes of Peace with Penny, they are on pennyst.com under podcasts or the Peace with Penny Facebook page. Today, I'll be interviewing Eran Avidor, an Israeli settler and peace activist. Unlike the people I've interviewed previously, Eran has been a peace activist most of his life. He has belonged to various socialist movements that we don't have here in the United States, and I'm anxious to learn more about them. He lives on kibbutz Na'aran in the Jordan Valley and works as both a fig farmer and with Roots Shorshim Judah, a peace organization that started in the West Bank in the Gush Etzion area and has expanded, establishing a branch in the Jordan Valley 4 years ago. Roots Jordan Valley has two peace groups, the first from adults of the Bedouin villages and the Israeli settlements. I don't know how familiar you are with modern-day Bedouins, but I'm looking forward to learning more about the Bedouin culture and the interactions between the local Bedouins, Palestinians, and Israelis. As I understand it, Bedouins and Israelis have extremely different cultures. Don't you wonder how they work together on peace? I know I do. The second group is working on peace between the Palestinian young adults of the city of Jericho and the Israeli settlements nearby. Since they are so new, we'll be concentrating on the first group. If you're curious about a high school youth group of Israelis and Palestinians, I suggest looking at last week's Peace with Penny podcast on my website with Roz Konis, who founded the one that has been running for 5 years and is helping Eran form this one here in the Jordan Valley as well. Now let's get going on our podcast. Eran, welcome.
Hi, Penny. Good evening.
Good to see you. So if we could get started, where were you born and raised, Eran?
Oh, I was born and raised in Holon, which is a suburb of Tel Aviv, a small city near Tel Aviv. Beautiful city.
Were your parents born in Israel or did they immigrate to Israel?
My mother was born in Romania, but she
Hmm.
made Aliyah about a few months old, and my father was born in Israel. Yes. So they're both Tsabarim, as we say it, natives.
Yeah. You were quite a peace activist growing up. Can you tell us about what types of activities you participated in, please?
Yes. Well, I grew up understanding that peace was a few days from now. It was gonna,
Oops.
jump up on us. It was just a matter of time when the people with the ties, from the big hotels will just bring it. So we had a celebration when the Oslo Accords, in the family, when the Oslo Accords were signed on the lawn with Clinton. And as I was, I would say, teenager, both mainly after the Rabin assassination, I used to go to demonstrations, to picket lines. I used to read every piece of news that was available. I even remember the day that Ehud Barak went to Camp David in the year 2000 to finish it up. I remember myself, I was about 2 days before enlisting to the army. We were still holding signs at checkposts, so supporting him in his efforts to bring peace. And, my motivation as a teenager was mainly the Rabin assassination. I was about 14 years old. And the day after Rabin was assassinated, we came to school. Everybody was in complete shock, And my teacher, he walked into the classroom. He couldn't say a word for about half an hour. He was sobbing. He was crying loudly. And he said to us, we were like children,
Yeah.
He said, they killed Rabin, but the main thing that happened is that they killed peace. It's going to take about 20 years to make peace. That's the big thing here. It was for us, it was a very, very harsh prophecy, and we worked really hard for about 5 or 6 years, so it won't come true. As a teenager, peace was, any minute now. I knew that I would have to go to the army, but I had a solid idea that my children won't need to. That's how I grew up.
I wish it played out that way, that's for sure.
That's right. Yeah.
So growing up, what was your opinion about Palestinians? And I mean, did you associate with them with all your peace activities?
No, that's I think the main issue with people like me growing up at a middle class, upper middle class cities in Israel, left-wing families. You could believe in all your heart in peace, but never have even one Arab friend, because I grew up in a Jewish city, no Arabs in sight. If you meet an Arab, it's only because he came to do some work at the house or maybe at a restaurant, but there is no joint community life between Israelis and Arabs. So no, it's a bit weird. As an adult, I can look at it and it looks weird, but as a teenager, there was no problem. Okay, I believe in peace. I work for peace. It doesn't mean I need to have a personal relationship. Yeah. There was no problem with it as a teenager.
Yeah, well, you know what you're taught and what you see, and no problem there. The adults didn't see a problem with that. And in fact, today, that's obviously one of the big issues that causes probably most of the problems, is that there isn't the association even today with each other.
Yes, it's amazing. we have at the Roots Initiative about 150,000 people that came to visit the Roots for the past 7 years. For most of them, meeting a Palestinian in our meetings was the first time they actually spoke to a Palestinian. So there's a lot of alienation, and alienation, you know, it grows fear, and fear grows violence. So,
Yeah.
but you know, as I look at Israeli society, I think a lot of people have a story very similar to mine.
Yes, certainly everyone I've spoken to, you know, all the peacemakers have had the same story. What's different is you come from a very pro-peace type of influence, and a lot of people that I've talked to eventually came to that as adults. But you had an unusual background, even growing up in the Jordan Valley. Could you tell us, it's in the West Bank, but can you tell us about a little bit of the history of the Jordan Valley? Because it's very different from what people think of in the West Bank.
Yeah, sure, it's important. The settlements in the Jordan Valley were established between the years 1967 and 1977. The government in Israel is secular, left-wing government, and it established these settlements according to a peace plan. Those days was called the Alon Peace Plan. Mm-hmm. It had a very solid civilian, economical, and mainly security reasons. And the Alon Peace Plan said, it's an example, that we should establish settlements only where there are no Palestinians, only where we have security interests. And you can see a line of settlements near the border with Jordan. And the people who did this were not, they understood themselves as part of implementing a reasonable peace plan between Israel and the Hashemite kingdom, and later on Palestinians. The logic is very simple. We have a very small waist as a country. It's about 140 kilometers, 130 kilometers, and the Jordan Valley is kind of a bumper between us and the hostile Arab world. And this is the main story. Most of the people here, I'm talking about 50 years later, are still connected to these reasons. We are not here because of religious reasons. We don't think we're doing God's work. We are not connected to any kind of, Messianic ideas of, freeing the land for God. These are very rational issues, and that's the main thing that happened here. You could also see, if you come to visit, that most of the land here is agriculture, so the settlements here in the Jordan Valley poured hundreds of millions of dollars into the land here and are mainly focused on development for many reasons, economical and Zionist reasons and security reasons. And if you go to other places in the West Bank, you could see that the main thing is housing. You see that in Samaria and Judea, settlements are more about houses, community. And in the Jordan Valley, the main thing is agriculture. We need to, have a lot of land in order to safeguard Tel Aviv from here. So when we came here, and still today, we are kind of a strange bird in the settlements, So most people in the Jordan, in Judea and Samaria are religious Jews, Orthodox religious Jews that came there for other reasons on different times by different governments. In 1977, we had a shift of power between left and right in Israel. And then you could see more settlements in everywhere, not regarding the security reasons or economical reasons and so far and so on.
So were there even any Palestinians living in the Jordan Valley when it was established?
We're talking about, I'm not talking about the city of Jericho. City of Jericho was about 10,000 people. Jericho is 20 minutes from here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, besides of Jericho, we're talking about between 2,000 to 3,000 Palestinians, and they still part of their families are still here, because we're talking about a vast area of land. You don't need to establish settlements inside their villages. So this is desert, just a desert without people, almost without people.
Yeah, I think you said in our pre-interview it gets to be like 120 degrees there.
Yeah.
Or is it 50 Celsius?
Yeah, it gets really, really hot in July, August. You can have a very bad week also in May. So yeah, we're talking about a pretty harsh desert.
And
but
you
this time
said
of year, it's great. It's nice outside.
yeah.
It's stop in about 2 or 3 or 4 weeks. So
Well, that's good. You said you were raised secular. Can you talk about how can you be a secular Jew? What does that mean?
wow. I would go for the basics. Okay, I don't follow mitzvot, Jewish mitzvot. I don't. The Saturday is it isn't another day in the week. It's a special day, but we drive on Saturday and we do everything. We use electricity and all that. We have a in our lifestyle, a very, very big part in our lives for holidays, Jewish holidays. We celebrate every one of them. There's no way we're going to forget one or not do a big family event or an event here in the kibbutz. And we are very connected. I am very connected to Jewish identity, but it's not, we don't have a day-to-day life by the halakha, as you say.
The rituals.
Yes. So, in my family, every Friday we have we have a Kabbalat Shabbat, and every Saturday evening we have an Havdalah. But it is more of a cultural way of life rather than a religious way of life. As I think more Orthodox or religious people feel how life is. So
yeah.
And I could say that we haven't found a better word than secular, but
right.
I don't. Most of the time, I don't feel secular. I don't feel that I don't have. There's nothing above me. There's nothing just me. I don't feel I'm alone in the world. Nihilism is not part of our life, as I could say. To be a secular is not to be a nihilist. Sometimes people, you say you're a secular, and they think maybe,
Do you consider yourself a settler?
A settler is a very, very tense word in Israel.
Yes.
Mainly because it is connected to religious people believing that their life in a certain place is God's work. And by that meaning, I'm not a settler. In a different way of looking at it, when I think about what we're doing here for Zionist reasons, for the people of Israel, I feel more like it. But what people don't really understand that the word settler has changed during the years.
Mm.
You know, it was kind of a consensus to go to live in the Jordan Valley. Pioneers of Israeli society went to live here. Not people my age, 40 years old, people about 70 years old today. They were pioneers. Everybody looked up to them, right?
Yes.
And mainly the shift happened mainly, and Yitzhak Rabin, our prime minister that was assassinated, he
Yes.
had no plan of carrying out the Jordan Valley settlements. He always said every peace accord will have the Jordan Valley at its large way. The main shift happened at the year 2000 when Prime Minister Barak went to Camp David and offered the whole of Judea and Samaria and the Jordan Valley. And in a couple of months, we became from pioneers of the Israeli society and we became settlers, which is, a tense word in the left wing of Israel. We are settlers in Israel, they have only two roles they can choose from. They can either be the bad guys, violent people, enemies of peace, and in the left wing, they could be obstacles for peace, or they can just move away when peace comes. You have only two roles as a settler for the left wing in Israel, and obviously I don't fit neither this one and neither that one. So we established a very, very binary political system through the last 20 years. There is less space for complexity. And the word settler, you could just understand it, it's a word that hasn't worked for us very good. We're stuck for about 30 years with this settler, not settler conversation.
Yeah.
So it's part of the complexity here. Part of the salad.
Yeah. So okay, so there's at least two versions of settlers. There's the religious settlers, there's the secular settlers, and do you get along? How did the two sides view each other?
I think, because there's also a third kind.
Of course, okay. It's Israel, of course.
Yeah, you have two Jews come to an island.
Yes.
And they automatically establish two synagogues in order not to visit the other's opinion. So, but
it's always, if you have two Jews, you have three opinions kind of thing.
Yeah. You have about, I would say, 100,000 settlers that are neither secular ideologists like us, and they're not, religious people. They're just here for the, cheap housing. So, and it's also part of the story here that people. Right. But I'll put it aside, and then I'll address your question. There is very, very little connection. You need to meet each other in order to establish some kind of relationship. Okay, so you have secular ideologists settlements in the Jordan Valley, and then you have Judea and Samaria, which are religious. You could do a lifetime without meeting them. So it's very hard to, say something very clear about the relationship. I would say in roots, when we met our guys from Gush Etzion that are ultimately religious, we found a very, very brave connection. It was like lightning struck between us, because there was something humanistic, responsible in the way they talk, in the way they engage the other, in the way they engaged us as a small group that has a lot to learn from them, and we found a very, very deep connection.
I know the feeling. I know.
Yeah,
When
They're
Ali Abu Awad and Rabbi Hanan came to the US on a speaking tour, and I met them in 2015. Well, I've been a proponent of roots ever since. So, you know, definitely, although Rabbi Hanan is very religious, he also is very aware of Palestinians and obstacles they face, and is very supportive. So I think you're right. It is a salad. It's not, you can't, it's so complicated because always you can guarantee that people are not necessarily, there's the ability to label people. It's very complicated. It almost, when you were talking between the religious settlers and the secular settlers and not ever really talking, it reminded me about Israelis and Palestinians not talking. If that people are people, I think, and they get on with their lives, with the people they know, and they're busy, and there you go. That's, working on peace takes a lot more effort to have relationships with people. So one of the also unusual things, at least unusual for outside of Israel, is that you live on a kibbutz Nahran, and about how many people live there?
We are about, I would say, 105, including the children. We've got a lot of children for the last years, about 60 adults and 40, 45 children.
And the kibbutz itself has, a history to it. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because when we were talking, that sounded really very interesting.
Yes, it was established at 1978, and it flourished. It was it was called the Pearl of the Jordan Valley, and it grew and grew. They had it going really good, and the people here in Iran at about 1993, they had a big social crisis between them. And what was really, I would say, unique was that they didn't work it out. They just left. So in a matter of about 3 or 4 months, at the spring of 1993, the place was abandoned. And it was sitting abandoned. It was abandoned. You have a kibbutz. You have a palm date, a big palm date, a garage, a lot of businesses that the kibbutz had, but no people. So the houses were like, empty. And everybody who lives in Iran is a member of the adult movement of the Machanot Ha'olim youth movement, which is a socialist, pioneering Zionist Israeli youth movement working all around Israel. And what we wanted to do was try to live those values of youth movement as adults. And we needed a place, a center of operations, in order to accomplish this. And at about 1999, we found out that there was a kibbutz with no people, an empty kibbutz, looking for people to flourish it. And then we just came to Nahran. At first, I came to Nahran in 2002. So the guys and the people who came here were 3 or 4 years older than me. And they were like 6 people at the beginning. And the place was a mess. It was wrecked. It was like the Wild West here. Stranded, empty houses without anybody, and young people coming to build the kibbutz again. And we just celebrated 20 years.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah.
So can you, because a kibbutz here, it doesn't exist, and it's a the socialist way of life. Can you talk a little bit about what that means, about, you know, how the how it works? Because we don't have anything like that here. You know, we earn what we earn and we keep what we earn, and it's a whole different system there. Can you talk a little bit about what life on your kibbutz is like?
Yes. First of all, I would say I think people need to understand the goal. Okay, there's a means to go to the end, but people need to understand what's the goal. Why are we doing this? We believe loneliness is the biggest disease of modern life. We believe that alienation is you know, it's a silent killer in modern day life, and we want to try to establish a way of life that nourishes freedom, and but not freedom in the way of being alone. We want to try to find a way of life that you can feel free together with other people. To have a solid social life with intimate relations between adults as very, very dear, you know, close friends that are kind of a partners, you know, partners for a way of life. And what we do here is part of a countrywide network. We have 6 other kibbutzim in Israel. All of them are in the inner cities. We are the only, you know, rural kibbutz. And what the main idea is working together in order to meet the Israeli society's challenges. So we have an inner cause, which is to be happy and to feel free and not to be alone and to have real good friends for life. And we have a cause that is bigger than us, Israeli society. We try to keep Israeli society from falling apart. You know, the complexity you spoke about earlier, Israeli society is made of islands. You can live on your islands and never meet people from the other island. And our work, you know, our goal in life is just trying to keep Israeli society in one part, trying to work that all this Zionist operation for about 100 years won't fall apart, like we had in our Jewish history, at the first and second house, demolishing for mainly brothers, Israeli brothers, Jewish brothers, hating and competing against each other. So that's what we are for. That's what we try to do. That's our goals. As a community, we have a certain way of life, which is sharing our expenses, which is very, you know, it's a big thing for us, being able to do stuff together. In a very, we try, you know, we don't have any votes here. We don't vote. We speak about things. We have about 4 or 5 weekly hours of learning together in order to build our values, build our relationships. Our way of life is consistent of, we have about 60 adults. We are divided into 4 or 5 groups, small groups that build the bigger kibbutz in order to give people their autonomy, to be autonomous, to be, you know, to have a lot of autonomy for their adult lives. We really didn't like the way old kibbutzim did this, when you had to vote on every small thing, when you had in the old kibbutz, you had a book of rules in order to understand how to conduct your really personal life. And we're trying to do things quite differently. I could just pray that we succeed, because you know, the road, this is not a paved road. We need to build it as we go along. And it's fun. I would say it's really fun.
I know that you obviously you have the farm, but your kibbutz is mainly educational kibbutz. Can you talk about that as well?
Yes, Israeli youth movements, for most of the years, their main goal was establishing settlements all over Israel, from Eilat in the south and to the, Metula in the north. What we tried to do at the early 90s was shift it a little bit. We said, okay, we have a role in settlements, we have a role in, land building Zionism. It's okay. But we have another role, which is connecting to Israeli society, and that's the way we got to education. Everybody in Iran has some kind of educational role, mainly in non-formal activities, afternoon, but we also have teachers, we have people that conduct seminars to schools, we have people that conduct seminars to principals of schools. We work a lot with the army, the IDF. In the IDF, you do a lot of educational work. A main thing I do, and a bunch of other guys and girls here, is trips to Poland.
Yes.
We work a lot about the memory of the Holocaust, which is a big, big, big issue in Israel. We're feeling that it's just going to vanish if we don't really work really hard. There's a lot of work with underprivileged youth and kids in Israel, which is, we are a society with there is a huge gap between the rich and poor in Israel, and a lot of our work is with poor, underprivileged kids in inner cities in Israel. So we try to find those projects that connect us to people. We are a people movement, and roots is just a glove to a hand. It's just amazing how we found that our way of looking at things and the way the guys in Gush Etzion look at things was so similar. We want to be a grassroots movement because we really believe in doing things people to people, just people to people.
Yeah, and in all of the time that I've, talked and read about Israel and visited and cared about Israel, you're the first person who's ever mentioned inner cities in Israel. I've never heard of that before our pre-interview. Can you talk a little bit about what are, I'm used to it in the US, but what is an inner city like? Where are you talking about? Are you talking about Tel Aviv? Are you, and who are the people living there? Are they the Falasha Jews? Are they who? Can you talk a little bit about that? Because you're, like I said, you're the first person who's ever mentioned inner cities in Israel.
First of all, maybe the term isn't correct. I'll try to explain what an inner city means if I understand the term. So,
okay.
As I said, there are very wide economical gaps in Israeli society, and when you go to the big cities in Israel, you see kids living in just unbelievable conditions. Kids in need of a meal at lunch that they just don't have it at home. Kids in need of a place to be between 4 to 6 or 7 afternoon. I can give examples about Eilat, about the north of Israel at Nasrat Elit and Migdal HaEmek. We had a branch in the main square in Jerusalem, in the Zion Square in Jerusalem, just picking up kids from the street. So and activating them, connecting them to the movement, trying to do some reaching out work with youth. And there are a lot of other examples. The main thing that happened for the last year that we just, a lot of this activity just, came into a big crisis. But what we are trying to do for the past 20 years is take the idea of education in a youth movement, which is mainly upper class, and find some low and, between low and middle class Israelis to be part of it. So we have Russian immigrants, we have Israeli Arabs, we have Olim Chadashim from Ethiopia that are a very, very, very problematic minority in Israel, and others, and also others. So
I'm sorry, problematic in what sense?
It's a generalization, but the Aliyah from Ethiopia had a very rough time trying to adapt to Israeli life. And if you go to some of the neighborhoods in Jerusalem, some of the neighborhoods in Rehovot in Israel, they are kinds of they resemble, sometimes you can see the ghetto there. They're, everybody is from the same school. They're not in touch with other parts of Israeli society. And what we try to do is mix people up. We try to meet them where they are. That's part of what we try to do. We have about 10 years of experience with immigrants from Sudan, Eritrea, and Nigeria. That's really, the center of Tel Aviv. It's a big subject. Immigrants from African states, they're not Jewish, right? So that's also some work we do. These are Hebrew-speaking kids. Okay, you have about a couple of thousand Hebrew-speaking African kids in Israel, living as some kind of weird immigrants without an immigrant card. So that's a thing we do.
They're not Jewish?
No, they're immigrants. They walked here. They walked from Sudan and Nigeria and Eritrea to Israel. I'm talking about the minority in Israel, right? So, but
right. Well, I guess over here I was used to like the drives to have the Ethiopian Jews and all that. I guess in my ignorance, I didn't realize that there are also others who came who weren't Jewish who came there.
We literally picked them up and brought them to Nahran. I'm talking about a group of about 30 kids from Africa, and it's a big issue in Israel.
You picked them up.
What did you say, Penny?
I'm sorry. You picked them up from where? From the streets?
Yeah.
So you're talking about homeless kids.
Yes.
I mean, everything that you're talking about, of course, unfortunately, we have here as well. And it is considered inner city. It's just, like I said, I've never heard about it. And it honestly, it saddens and it shocks me.
I think it's not an accident that you didn't hear about it. It's these are the left. This is they're not on the sidewalk of Israeli society. They're even further aside. These kinds of kids. So most people rather not look at it.
Yeah, we have the same problem here.
So it's a non-issue in Israeli society. Okay, immigrant kids Nobody looks at them. They're not existing almost. You won't hear about them in the news, but they're there. Somebody needs to reach out.
So what did you do with the kids?
We took them to Naran. I'm talking about, this is 2008. Okay, that's 12 years ago. They're now adults.
Yeah.
They were a group of, as I said, about 30 kids at the ages of 10 to 18. We just took them to Naran on a bus.
And they have no parents with them, they're by themselves?
That's the problem. We're talking about families, okay, immigrating to Israel by foot, okay,
Yeah.
enduring harsh conditions through this trip, walking into Israel. Some of them got stranded, got separated from their parents. Okay, some of them did this alone without their families. So if you came to the center of Tel Aviv in 2007 and 8, you could see children, black children, okay, that don't know a word of Hebrew, without anybody in the world. And what we did there was taking them to Naran, giving them clothes, feeding them, giving them, you know, a safe place to sleep. And we established some kind, you know, it was kind of an ulpan, if you heard the word.
I have, but if you could explain it for the rest of the viewers, please.
It's a school to learn, you know, Hebrew that you can use. Usable Hebrew in order to manage yourself. And what they were here for about 3 months. And then we found a place for them at boarding school in Israel. And they continue to come to our activities, but as pupils in a boarding school. So they found a place. Some of them are adults living in Israel. Some of them went back to South Sudan. As you know, it's an independent country today. Some of them were deported to South Sudan when it was established, and we're still in touch with them. They live now, it's a mess. They live in Uganda in a boarding school. We come, for the last 5 years, we've been going there, traveling to Uganda to meet them, in order to stay in touch. These are, as I said, Hebrew-speaking kids and youngsters that Israel is part of their identity, but they're not part of Israeli society. And it's a very big tragedy, these kids. But, you know, it taught us a lot about how to work with different cultures, with different kinds of people, how to give everybody a role, how to look at everybody as someone that has a job in building a good society. Maybe he hasn't found his exact work that needs to be done, but everybody has a role. That's you know, I think it's really connected to roots, because roots is people in the midst of the conflict have a role. Everybody has a role in making this place better. So we've been trying to work this way even before we established roots in the Jordan Valley. But it's a way of looking at things, if you understand me. So
yeah. So speaking of roots, because I definitely want to talk about roots. They're one of my favorite peace groups, as you know, and by the way, if anyone's interested, if you could put, they're raising money for their efforts. If you could put in the chat box a place where people could donate if they're interested, I'd appreciate that. Roots is an organization, like I mentioned before. I had met Ali Bouawad and Rabbi Hanan in 2015 when they came to speak in the United States, an organization that really works on peace between Israelis and Palestinians, and you opened a branch in the Jordan Valley between Bedouins and Israelis and some Palestinians. An adult group, but you've got two groups. The other one, you're just starting out as a youth group. And we're not going to talk a lot about that. Like I said, if people want to look into a youth group, if you look at last week's podcast with Roz, who's helping set the one up here as well, that would be a way to learn about what Roots is doing with youth groups. But let's get into what you're doing with the Bedouins and the Israelis and the Palestinians. First of all, what does a modern day Bedouin lifestyle look like today?
It's changing all the time. I think the main word is change. We're talking about a very traditional society, which is nomadic in its tradition. When I say we're talking about a traditional society, we're talking about legacies dating back to, 1,000 years ago, in some cases, when people, look at their roots, their father and their grandfather, and, and it's very special to know and understand and connect to. I think the main thing is that the Bedouin culture looks at reality in a different set of goggles, I would say. The main values are the family connection between people, which is very, very strong. I was amazed for the past years understanding what these guys would do to a relative, which is, not somebody close from their family, not a brother, somebody from a different village that they may have some kind of a cousin connected to, which they met, I don't know, once and a half times in their life. This is also a very, it's a ranger society. These people could walk in the desert and find out exactly which kind of animal walked there, not yesterday, a week ago. And it's just fascinating. When I go to the desert, okay, plants, trees, maybe some tree you can find here. They're like every square meter is a story. Okay, which kind of birds? When did they come here? The resolution is just crazy. How do you know that this camel that walked here is pregnant? And they're not joking. Okay, so it's a community very connected to nature in a very special way. It's not nature as in going to a lot of hikes. They live in a hike. Okay, so and in modern day life, in the Jordan Valley, also I would say, I don't know all the Bedouins in all Israel. You have different types and families, and it's also part of the salad. In the Jordan Valley, they build houses. They no longer live in tents, but they have a tent near the house. Okay, so if you come to visit, you will probably sit with them in the tent outside the house, not because they're shy of something, because that's their way to show respect, because the tent is the meeting place between people. Okay, and modern day things, cell phones, cars. Some of them are how can I say in English? They are you know, that they work at, they have a job, a 8 to 5 job.
Yeah.
Which is special. You couldn't see it about 40 years ago in Bedouin culture. So they're changing all the time. You know, I have a Bedouin friend, which is not part of the Roots initiative. His ringtone at the cellular phone was the sheep, the sound of the sheep. And you know, we're sitting drinking tea, and he has, you know, we're sitting, and then all of a sudden I hear the sheep. And but they're not there. They're home, and we are at the plantation.
Yeah.
And I'm saying to him, "Why are there sheep? They're not there. They're home." And he says, "I really miss them.
Oh my gosh.
I work 8 to 5. I can't be with the sheep. My son takes them out every day. You know, I'm no longer a nomadic sheep herder, but I have them at my ringtone. So, so
what
is changing? It's changing.
What is he doing as a job?
He works at the date plantation as a waterman. He is in charge of that. Thousands of trees will get their water.
Are they considered Palestinian? What are they considered?
They have a Palestinian ID of the Palestinian Authority, and they are. I just closed the window here because it's gonna, you know, just a sec.
But you have a dust storm there now, yeah?
We're in the middle of a dust storm here. We were talking about, yeah, they're Palestinians, and they have a Palestinian ID, but in their identity, they're first of all Bedouins from a specific family, and then they are Palestinians. We're talking about one of the most, you know, it's a very, in the hierarchy system in Palestinian society, they're on the lowest platform, okay? You have them, and probably, I think, lower than them, you could find people that are working with the Israeli army. Okay, so, and that's their place in Palestinian society. There are a lot of stigmas about them. There's a lot of prejudice. There's a lot of racism that they suffer from as a minority. And I love them. They're great neighbors. They're great people to work with on this, you know, Roots, sometimes impossible mission in doing peace.
Are they more open to it than their other Palestinian neighbors, or it just really depends on who you're talking to?
It really, really depends on who you're talking to.
Why did Roots in the Jordan Valley choose to work with them as opposed to more traditional Palestinian families?
It all started in our plantation. We have a date plantation, quite big one. They came to work with us, and then we became friends. And the relationship between Israelis and Palestinians in the settlements are, you can work with the Palestinian, but you don't meet them afternoon. You don't go to dinner. You don't go to wedding. You work together. Most of the times, the Jews are the bosses and the Palestinians are the, you know, common daily workers. But what happened to us was that we became friends. And it was the most natural thing to do when we started establishing roots. You know, those were ties that were made. Now let's take these ties and build another another way of understanding each other. We want to meet after noon. We don't want to keep, the relationship between Israelis and Palestinians that to be, a boss-worker relationship. That's very big part of the conflict,
Mm-hmm.
In the Israeli-Arab conflict, in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, Jews are in a really different level of income, a really different level of economics. Palestinians are really poor, and for us it was really natural. We couldn't establish it with anybody else.
Did the Bedouin
5 minutes from here.
Did the Bedouins have the animosity toward the Israelis like many of the Palestinians do?
Less. I think in general, if I look in general of the Palestinian society, which I'm not an expert of, I think they have less animosity. There is something with a tradition of, to be a Bedouin is to take people into your house. Never mind what time it is. Never mind what your situation is. Hospitality is one of the biggest values of Bedouin culture. So I think there's something in that makes this a good match. But also they are less connected to mainstream ideology, less connected to Fatah party, which is the main political party in the Palestinian Authority. Maybe it has some points in why this worked out. Maybe we never stop to think about it because it's like neighbors. Roots is like neighbors taking it to another level of meaning of community. So you don't choose your neighbors. It just depends which kind of work will you do with them. How will your common places look like?
Okay.
When next window because the storm is starting
I'm sorry.
It's weird.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear. I heard the storm. Are you okay? Are you?
No, I'm fine, but just the window was open. There's a sandstorm here.
Okay, so in the paper, okay, there are lots of controversies that you read about in the Jordan Valley, that it's a hotbed of controversy between the Israelis and the Bedouins. The IDF is reported to dismantle their living tents and declares the territories where they live target practice areas, and some Israeli settlers have attacked Bedouins, and supposedly the IDF allows settlers to graze their sheep there after telling the Bedouins to leave. Are these types of obstacles things that come up in your group? Do you discuss these kinds of things?
Yes, we discuss them, and we've started to do work in order to understand them more and to find solutions on the ground to these situations. There is another war happening in Judea and Samaria between Israelis and Palestinians. There's a war of lands. Okay, you have violent conflict between the army and the citizens, occupying millions of Palestinians. That's one thing. And there is also a struggle of lands in the sea. You have the ABC territories in Judea and Samaria, and there are local fights between Israelis and Palestinians about these sea territories. And some of them are happening, in the Jordan Valley, in the northern Jordan Valley, also in the southern Jordan Valley. what we try to do here is quiet behind the scenes work with all the parties involved in order to find a way to reduce violence. There has been an increase of violent clashes between Palestinians and settlers in the Jordan Valley for the last few years, and we're very, very, I would say, disturbed by it. We are fearful. You know, Jordan Valley is very, very quiet place. There are a lot of interest, a lot of tradition of getting together between Israelis and Palestinians, and we're really worried. And what we try to do in the group, in the Roots group, is going together to those places, hearing both sides.
So
we really have rule. Don't go alone as an Israeli, don't go alone as a Palestinian. We work together. We try to find out solutions together on the ground. It's really hard doing it.
You mean when an incident happens? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, when there's a violent incident.
Can you like give a couple examples?
Yeah, sure, but more than when there's a violent incident, the more complex issues are not violent incidents. We're talking about issues of, you know, struggles of lands between farmers. How do you mitigate this? What resources do we have as, you know, plain civilians in order to intervene?
I mean, what kind of, you know, first of all, I've never lived on a farm. And second of all, I mean, what kind of struggles are there between land? Is it who owns what? Is it, you know, I don't want to guess. Can you explain a little bit further what that means?
I'll give, you know, two examples. One kind of event is when you have vast areas of lands that are, at the Oslo Accords, they were said to be sea territories, you know? So it is both civilian and military Israeli responsibility, right?
Yeah.
It was to be a phase in peace process. It was about to last, you know, 1, 2, 3 years, this situation. It's been over 25 years. And, you know, people move on. Villages grow, people need land. And then the struggle starts. Whose land is it? Palestinian or Israeli? On paper, it's Israeli land, right? But Palestinians need, you know, they need it in order to grow. Their population is growing. So you have real, you know, it's sometimes an acre-to-acre struggle between Israeli and Palestinian farmers. And eventually, the Israeli farmers are much stronger. They have an army behind them. They have police. They have funds. Okay? Also, you can also find Palestinian Authority footprints in what you could, you know, if you don't know otherwise, just plain Bedouins trying to herd their sheep. No, they are sent there by Palestinian Authority in order to strengthen the conflict. Okay, so sometimes when you hear in the paper that the IDF, you know, ruined the village of Bedouins, they're not there by mistake. They were sent there. They knew that it would be wrecked by the IDF. So it's just combat of lands. It's going on everywhere in the sea territories, in Judea and Samaria and the Jordan Valley, and it's getting worse. So this is one example. Other examples are just extremists, Israeli extremists or Palestinian extremists, just lashing out at each other, mainly at innocent people. And we try to, when this happens, near us, we try to be involved. In one case, one time we came to a family that was hurt by extremists, Israeli extremists, and you know, we're talking and talking. They're telling their stories, and we can see the guy there, the 19-year-old son of the family. He has a black eye. He has a, you know, a torn lip. He was just smashed 2 days ago, just going to work by Israeli extremists. And we're sitting there. I'm sitting there, and my Palestinian partner from Roots are sitting there. And then we say to them, well, what kind of help do you need? We're Roots. Hi, we're the Roots Initiative. We're here for you. What kind of help do you need? And it's amazing, you know. They said they just need us to be my cell phone open at night, so they could call me, so I could call Israeli police, because Israeli police doesn't understand Arabic. It's just amazing what people really need. And then I said, well, okay, no problem. And then I said, okay, what else do you need us to do? We're Roots. You know, we want to help you out. We want to show solidarity. And they just asked us to use the photos they took of the people that attacked them and move them on to Israeli authorities, because they don't have access to Israeli authorities. Okay, they are part of the Palestinian Authority, but when they have a clash with Israelis, they have no address to go to. They needed us to take the pictures to Israeli police, to Israeli military, and help them out so it won't happen again. It's been about half a year since that happened. So, and there's quiet since then.
Are the Israeli authorities sympathetic to what happened to them?
Really, they're really sympathetic, and they were furious to hear about this incident. They were furious, and we don't really know what they did, you know, to the end of what they did with it. But it's been quiet for about 5 months since that happened. You know, this is real life work.
Yeah.
We're really trying to help out. At the end of the meeting, you know, we're like 24 hours after it happened. No, 48 hours after the incident. At the end of the meeting, you know, it's in Arabic. I don't really understand everything. I understand only part of what they're saying.
So you have an interpreter, right?
No, I have a Palestinian partner coming with me. He knows Arabic and Hebrew, but he's not an interpreter. He's the thing. He's Roots. And so am I. So the father of the family, at the end of the meeting, he asked him, but tell me, who is Eran? Who is this guy? Where is he from? You know, he didn't catch it. And then he tells him, he's from Nahran, he's from here, it's 5 minutes from here. And then when he understood that a neighbor of his came to help him out, a neighbor of his is sickened by what has been done to him, everything changes. You know, they are used to people from Tel Aviv or from Haifa or from Jerusalem coming to help out the poor Palestinians that are getting hurt, and then they go back into their Range Rover and drive back to Tel Aviv. So I'm a peace activist nearby.
Right.
You know, I'm a partner of theirs, and we're still. Their problem is my partner. If we have violent extremists, Jewish extremists here, it's going to be it's also my problem. It's not a Palestinian problem. It's my deal. That was so meaningful for us, because we managed to help out and show solidarity and show them that not all Israelis are violent. You know, this is a war happening. There's a lot of violence. The struggle of lands and the sea territories is violent. I'm not trying to cover it up. It's complex. We have different kinds of interest in what will happen in sea territories. Okay, but you know, attacking innocent people going to work at 5 a.m. Come on, people.
Yeah,
That's not what we're trying to do here.
right. Well, it's getting late. I have one more question for you. If you were speaking to the people of the world, what would the message be that you would want them to know about your work on peace and your community?
Wow, great question. I think, wow, it's, I'm trying to imagine it, but I think the main thing is understanding, trying to, I would say differently, okay?
Sure.
I think the main message is to prepare our society to peace. To do a transformation between believing in peace as something exterior to me, I don't, and rather than that way of thinking, to experience peace as a personal matter that has a big role in society. If in 20 years from now, like my teacher told me, yes, he told me at 95 that at 2015 it won't be over. Yes, it's
Yeah.
amazing. If I can say in 2040 that I was part of preparing Israeli society to peace, that it's just amazing. We need to prepare our societies to peace. At the end, the political arrangement will come. I believe it will come one day, but it will come if we are prepared. If peace is a day-to-day experience, we try to, work about it. I think it's universal message for everybody in the world. Everybody has, if you're preparing something, everybody has a role, right? Everybody
Yeah.
has a responsibility. If you're preparing the future. So I really enjoy doing this in Roots. I think Roots is doing, an amazing job in this new way of thinking, rethinking conflict, I think. I think that's it. It's a big thing.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Eran, for sharing your experiences with us. And
Right.
next week, again at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, we will be speaking with Bruce Schaefer, a professional photographer who uses photography to bridge the gap between Israeli and Palestinian teens. As they work together on their assignments, they begin to understand that the other has more in common with them than they would ever have imagined. I hope you'll join us. To our listeners today and those listening to the recording later, thank you, and may you live in peace, shalom, and salam.